Hello everyone, this is Marcel bringing you information on how to survive retail and how it's actually a very difficult job. My heart goes out to everyone that's out there working those jobs as we speak. So first I'd like to share some war stories with you about my experiences in retail. I was actually doing it for nearly 12 years altogether. I worked at a number of different companies, all the way from small hometown stores all the way up to some pretty major retailers in the city. I never had any significant negative reviews and I was never fired, so I would consider myself a survivor. I was a bit of a smart ass though, and not everybody's gonna be able to get away with that like I did. Use sarcasm with caution. So anyway, my fun stories. I had a woman come in one time asking for some kind of Teflon spray that goes in a toilet, and I told her, well ma'am, unfortunately we don't carry that here. I've never seen it. And she said, well that's ridiculous. In the city you sell it all the time. I said, well we don't carry that here. She says, that doesn't make sense. How do you keep your damn shit from sticking? I looked at her and I said, well our shit doesn't actually stick here. Had a guy came in wanting to buy 14-2 wire to hook up his big electric dryer to. For those who don't know, that's way too small to hook up a dryer. It could very possibly set on fire. I told the guy, you can't do that. You could possibly burn your house down. He says, son, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never had a problem. And I looked at him and I said, well, it's never too late to learn how to do it right. Had a guy recognize me off the clock one day as I was doing some shopping in my store. Wanted to try and ask me how to find a bunch of products to set up his project. I told him I was off the clock today, I wasn't going to be able to help him, and he said, oh come on, that's screwed up. What? Why not? I apologized, but he started to get rude with me, so I asked him where he worked. I remember him saying something like a car dealership, so I asked him to sell me a car, and he looks at me and says, well, I'm not at work right now. So I said exactly and walked away. Had a woman call me up on the phone one time, very upset and acting quite rude with me about how her stove stopped working, the burner went out on it. And I said, well, we carry those here. She says, well, you know, you're supposed to fix it for me. When something breaks, you have to fix it. I said, well, it's a consumable item, but alright, let me see what I can do for you. How long ago did you buy the appliance? She gets kind of quiet. Well, ma'am, I need to know when you bought it so I can help. She says it was about 2.5 years ago. So I asked her if she purchased an extended warranty plan, and she says, no, I don't have time for that shit. I said, well, that's what I would have used to have been able to help you. She got upset with me. Starts yelling at me on the phone about how we're supposed to take care of her and it was a $500 appliance. And honestly, $500 is nothing for a stove. They go well over $5,000. But that's besides the point. So I asked her, alright, say for a minute that you buy a car. You drive it for 2.5 years and the tire goes flat. Then you go back to the dealership and tell them you want a new car. What do you think they're gonna say? Of course she says, well that's stupid. The person would never do that with the car, you just get a new tire. And I tell her, well that's what you're trying to do with your stove. What's really bad about it is if she'd been a little nicer to me, I'd have just marked down the burner and given it to her. I could go over hundreds of stories like this over my time in retail where people were ornery, but honestly, you want to get to the meat of this video, which is how to survive it. The first and most important thing in any retail environment is safety. You might roll your eyes at me, but honestly, that's what your managers want to hear. And injuries and accidents cost companies a fortune. Second thing to keep in mind is communication. Make sure that when you speak to your customers and your colleagues that you're doing it clearly. You understand what they want and what you want from them. I would recommend writing everything down on a notebook. Yes, I know that's old school since we're all using cell phones now, but you can't use that at work and I'll get to those later. Jot down everything you're told to do and anything you don't get done in that notebook so that when they try to say later that you didn't do it, you can say, no, I've got it written down right here, yes I did. You may eventually come across a person that'll come up and tell you they're an expert at something and then ask you how to do it. Then when you try to tell them how to do it, they'll turn around and say that you're wrong. Just be prepared for it. It's likely to happen depending on where you work. That brings me to another point. Always assume that you could be talking to someone who knows more than you that's actually testing you. So if you're not sure about something, ask your peers or your boss how to do it. A serious customer will always respect your honesty, and a false customer trying to troll you isn't going to give a shit either way. Also, be careful how much you trust your colleagues. And I say this because everybody's there for a job, they're there for money. Retail can get really competitive. So don't assume that everyone is your friend. And seriously, don't date. Don't get into that nonsense while you're at work. I know you're gonna fall in love, a lot of us do, I've done it. Let me just say that it's really not worth the trouble, and it happens a lot more often than you think because people are in close proximity and have nothing better to do. Out of all my colleagues that I can remember getting fired, about a third of them were actually romance-related firings. Maintain a positive attitude both on and off work. Actually, one of the biggest problems in retail is just getting a sour attitude from it. You carry that with you home, it can actually affect your family. It's just not a good thing. Leave work at work. Don't think about it until you clock back in the next day. Another important thing to remember is to be politically correct around people and coworkers. And the reason why I say that's a high number of the firings that I've seen were because someone was either accused of being sexist or racist. Company just can't afford the liability, it's better to let the employee go. It's unfortunate, but just the accusal is enough to sometimes get people fired. Remember that a person doesn't actually have to be party to a conversation in order to be offended by it, so if your colleagues start cracking offensive jokes, it's usually best just to step out of the room and go use the restroom. Good thing to say is, on that note, I need to go take a piss, and just step out. Odds are they'll laugh, and if you get asked later, just say you vacated the area when it started happening. That is assuming, of course, you don't intend to report it. In the end, you gotta follow your conscience. I just try to always give people an opportunity to improve before I report them. Another big deal is to be observant and watch your surroundings, be flexible, try to be willing to learn other positions in your store, and always be willing to take training when it's offered to you. These things can only help you with time. Think of it as making yourself a more valuable and indispensable employee for their company. You become more of an asset, and it's job security. Dress nicely. And try to avoid using your cell phone. It's just generally perceived as rude. If you have to do something with it, step around the corner or step outside, take a break and use it that way, so your customers and bosses don't actually see it. Furthermore, you're going to have to find a balance between what's required to do and how much extra you want to do to look good. Be the best at what you do, but try not to go too much more than about 10% harder than everybody around you is working. You don't want to set yourself up to get taken advantage of for no extra money. Your typical promotion could be as little as $2. I know mine was only $1, so for doing 3 times the work, I really didn't get much more money for it. On that note, be sure to take your breaks and vacations. Don't let retail burn you out. It's one of the first things that happens. You get so wrapped up in work that you don't take a time to actually relax, go eat something, exercise, and be healthy. Your body starts breaking down. There's no way you can keep up with something as volatile as retail is. It may seem small, but remember to use the restroom when you have the opportunity. Not doing that's going to catch up to you quick. So I worked in a home improvement store, and honestly, you're going to find times that you're an underpaid plumber, electrician, engineer, repair person, and even some days a therapist. Something you want to keep in mind when people come up to you with these big projects and start slamming you with questions that you really are not paid enough to answer. Sometimes they're doing it because they don't want to pay $45 to $100 an hour to an actual plumber or electrician to solve that problem for them. Don't get put into a situation where you're giving people answers that you're going to be liable for. They really don't pay you enough for that. It is very possible during your time in retail you're going to run across a thief, possibly even catch them red-handed. You always want to remember not to accuse anyone of anything. Just be helpful. And don't take it personally. Try and think of it as a game. Find clever ways to show you know without saying, if you can't get to a manager, that is. Say if you saw someone stuffing watches in their bag, you could go up to them and say, "Hey, did you need help with watches?" You're not insinuating anything, but you're making it pretty clear you knew what they were shopping for. Best case scenario, they'll rethink their actions and put the items back. I will say that I'm actually really bold. I think the average person should probably just walk away and tell a manager. As you go through your day assisting customers, you will find very quickly that the customer is not always right, but it certainly helps to make them feel like they are. I had a big problem with people trying to haggle with me, either by finding kinks in the system of how the store was run, or literally just by saying they wanted something at a lower price, and that isn't something my store was willing to allow. They would even get as desperate and vindictive to try and say that I had wronged them somehow in order to get a discount or to get something for free. Don't let these people back you into a corner, and if you have to, call for help. Get your manager over there to take care of it. That's why they pay them the big bucks. Overall, in the end, be friendly, helpful, take care of your customers, but stand your ground. Remember, $8 an hour is not worth letting people walk all over you, customers or employees. At the end of the day, we all have to respect ourselves, right? Well, that's enough thoughts for one day, but tell me your experiences in retail or even shopping. What's the weirdest thing you've ever seen or experienced? Put your comments down below. I want to hear them. If you want more interesting stories, like and subscribe.